Hello, Professor. This is Akhil, and this is my explanation and the TDD process video for the assignment 3 given this fall semester. So the task here is to develop a password validator tool. I could see that this tool can only be, should be at least 12 characters long, or else it will be considered as an invalid password, and the password can only contain these variables, these statements, which is an uppercase alphabets, lowercase alphabets, number 0 to 9, special characters. And it also says that it checks if the criteria doesn't match, it will print an invalid password. If the user enters an invalid password, the program repeatedly prompts the user to enter a password until it's deemed valid. Right, and also the program will further check the strength of the password. If the program must, if it successfully goes through all these one, two, three, four, all these 5 statements or 5 constraints, it will be called as a strong password. And it says that for it to be a strong password, it should be 14 characters long. It should use a combination of upper and lowercase. It should be a combination of number special characters, and then it should have at least 2 special characters and 6 alphabetic characters. Okay, so since this assignment mainly focuses on TDD approach, we will first start writing the test for it. So here I've opened a blank project in IntelliJ. This is a Maven project, and to start the test, I think I'll just create a test file in this. So I can just create a new Java. Oh, it should not Java class. New file. Okay, and we can name this file as, since it's a password validator, I think I'll name this as password validator test.java. Okay, so yeah, so we'll start writing the code for this particular function. So from our observation, we could see that this should have, first let's start with the public class, and then we'll have the class name as this as well. It's going to be password validator test. Right. Yep. And then this is our class that we're going to use. And inside this class, we should, okay, so let's start writing a basic test. Since this is a password validator, the first thing that comes to my mind is to check if a password is, let's say, if it's a invalid password or so that is just to validate the password, right? So if it's either an invalid password or a valid password. So we can use JUnit test for this. So I'm thinking we can do test at test, which is a JUnit annotation, and I'm just gonna call this test as public void. It's gonna test for password validation, so I'm just gonna do this test validation. And since on this function for us, so what we're gonna check here is we're gonna assert that, suppose, and we're gonna use assert equals here. Assert equals, we can import this. Oh, okay, anyways, we'll come to this part. Yeah, we have the test. Okay, so basically for the validation, we can check if the input we give is maybe equal to, let's say, if the output that we get is an invalid password, right? So I'm thinking if we do this, that we want to assert that if we give an input, let's say the input is PASS password 123. So this one, as you can see, this is 13 characters, right? Yeah. Oh, no, this is 8 and 3. Okay, this is 11 characters. So for our password to be valid, we would at least need 12 characters, right? If we can look at the question, it says a password must be at least 12 characters long. If so let's just do the opposite of it. So if it's 11, this should give us an invalid password return, right? So and we cannot simply give this input as it is, so it will be passed through a function. So I'm thinking this function can be called something to validate the password. So I'm just going to call this as validate password. Let's assume that we have a function which does this job for us. It's gonna call so this function is gonna get this parameter, which will be our main program function, and it's gonna test and whatever function we're gonna write, it should print out an invalid password for us, right? So like similarly, right, we can just have few of these here where we're gonna say, well, first one is gonna be for invalid password, so what is gonna be a valid one, right? But for valid, we have two cases, so it should either be a weak password or a strong password. So we can just make one for both. I will just say it's gonna be a weak password if we have our input. Let's say for a weak password, it should be at least 13 characters, I mean 12 characters long. So we can just have this password 123 and then maybe exclamation. So this should be deemed as like a weak password. And we can also have one, right? We can also have one for the strong one. So we can have the program to say a strong password is one which, what can be? So for us to qualify as strong password, we need to have some categories, right? So it should be at least 14 characters. It should use a combination of upper lowercase, numbers, special characters. So we should have at least 2 special characters and 6 alphabetic characters. So I'm thinking we can just modify this a bit, where we can just say, well, this is gonna be a strong password. Strong password. We can have 1, 2, 3 in it, and then we can also do 2 special character. Oops. We can also do 2 special characters here. So essentially, if we pass this to our imaginary function, it should now print out a strong password. And if we do this, it should print out a weak password. And if we do this, it should print out a invalid password, right? So this can be one test. We can verify if our function is working properly. And okay, so let's now move on to a different test. Maybe the second thing I can think of is we can maybe test its strength, right? Because password has strength, so the strength can be either weak or strong. So we can do a test where it asserts and tests if we have the proper strength. Before that, I think we can we'll just import these functions that we're using. So we're using assert equals, which checks if this invalid password is equal to this output that we get. Yeah. So moving on to the second functions that we're going to use, I'm thinking we'll use a public void, so we can check on the test password strength, right? So we can do a test on that. So we can do test password strength, and here what we are checking is the strength of the password, if it's either a weak one or a strong one. So it's going to be something similar to the previous one. It's just that we can see, yeah, we can just copy paste this one. So this is going to check, oops, me correct this. So this is going to call this function, right? And then it's gonna say, well, this is going to be a weak password here. That's a weak password. And then that's gonna be a similar thing where it's gonna check for a strong password. So we'll have this as a weak password, and then we'll have one which checks for the strong password. 2, 3, and for a strong password we know that we need inputs with 2 special characters. Yeah, that's right. And maybe we'll have another test here. Thus, I think the next thing we can check is obviously is going to be the easy guess here. It's gonna we can test out the length of the password, since we have some constraints here to check. That is, a password should be at least 12, about 12 for it to be valid, and then it should be above 14 for it to qualify to become a strong password. If it is under 14, it's not going to be a strong password, right? So we'll have 2 things here, and also we can actually separate this into even more by saying, well, we have a case where it's going to be 0 lengths, right? So what if we give a null input? What's going to be that case then? So we can actually have tests for this. For this, I'll just use a test which has public void, and then we can call this test as test password length. So what's gonna do is it's gonna check for the password length, and for this we're just gonna have few asset equal statements. The first one is, right, let's just consider the first one to be a null password, input where it has nothing. For this, it should obviously print out an invalid password. Right, so let's see. So this should print out an invalid password. Oh, yeah, it should print out an invalid password, and let's just assume that we're also using the same function, validate password. And this should be, so since we are just using, so let's just see, this is a null input, and we should check the password for this, right? And so this for the empty case, and we're gonna have a case which is somewhere between 0 and 12. So we're gonna have a similar pattern here. We can just copy paste this in, and then say for something which is between 0 and 12. So even though we have let's say that all the characters here that we want, so this should essentially fail, because even though we have all the characters, since it's not about 12, right, this is for, yeah, so this is below 12 characters, so this should also print out an invalid password case for us. And moving on, so these are the first 2 conditions, and the next condition would be where we have a valid strong password for a case which is between 12, which is, which is about above 14, right? So since the strong password should be above 14, we're gonna have a case where it's gonna be above 14, and then within, let's say, 30. So let's just do a normal strong password where it's gonna be a regular strong password, right? So we'll just have this as strong pwd 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8. Yeah, it's just a regular strong password we're gonna use here. And next we're gonna check what do you say, you're gonna check a case which is a very rare exception, where if, let's just test out the limit here, right? We're gonna test out for a value which is greater than 12, I mean greater than 14, which is going to be, or we can just do something which is greater than 30 as well. So let's say that we want to type a password and we want to test out the limit of how far this can go. So wait, to test out that, we can just see, so let's just include some access here as well. So essentially even this password should work, and I'm guessing this is about 30. If not, I'll just add more variables here to make it about 30. So we can use these 4 tests to test out the length. Right. Alright. Okay, wait. I just realized that we're calling the function, but we need to have a class for it. So real quick, I think we can just call this main function here. And maybe we'll just rename this main function as password validator, right? Because we want our function to be called as this. And hopefully this will refactor. Yeah, we'll rename the file. So yeah, we're good here. What is the problem here? So okay, so we're gonna have this class, but let's make sure to get this class in here in the test file. So we can just, let's say, so we need to create an instance of this class so that uh, we could use that class to call this particular function. That's how test usually works. So let's just create a private static variable of that class object. So let's create the object for that particular class. We'll call it password validator, and let's use a before annotation here, so which is like a setup where we're doing, and we'll just call this function as setup. We'll have public void setup. Oops, my bad. We'll use upper lower cases here. Oh, and then we will, so what this function should do is that it's gonna create a new instance of this particular class, which will be a new password validator. So essentially, so we can use this particular password validator to call this particular function. So we'll just use that everywhere here, and then we're gonna call this function from that class, right? So this will just make things easier for us in the long run. Okay, and then we can just, because we don't want to directly call this particular class, but use an instance of the class to call it, right? Yeah, we'll just add it for every function that we have created so far. Right. Alright, so the next test I can think of is, let's see. So since we have tested the length, the strength, and the validation if it's weak, strong, or invalid, maybe we can test out the changes for the strong password so that it differentiates between a strong and a weak one. So from our question, I could see we tested out the length of the password. So maybe now we can test out the special characters. Like what happens if there's a combination of numbers and special characters, and what happens if there is no special characters, what happens if there is a special character and it's a weak password and a strong password and invalid. So we just need to test out the special characters now. That is a test case that I could think of. So to test out this, we'll just create another function which is going to be called, let's just make it simple and then call test special characters. Right, and then this function is going to test out all the special characters that we have. So for this, just like the previous cases, I think we can take an example of this one. Okay, yeah, we just type it in. So we're gonna check. So first, it's gonna be an invalid password. Invalid. So first we want this to be an invalid password when we pass in, let's say our input is what do we pass in? Validate password. Okay, so for this particular function we could pass an invalid password, but we we can mention some special characters here. So this is an invalid password because even though it has special characters, this should be considered as invalid. Right, we can just do a couple of these where we can so it's first it's gonna be a invalid password, and then second it's gonna be a strong password. Let's just do a strong one. So for the strong password, what we can do is we'll just add two couple of variables here by pwd, and then we can do 123, and then we can add another exclamation. All right, yeah. So this will work as a strong password. And oh, my bad. So I changed this. So sorry, this will be a strong password. This will be a weak password. And for the weak password, what we can do is we can just have a weak password, but it is going to have all the special variables. So let's just add in some variables in there. Alright, so this is our weak password, strong password, invalid password. So maybe next we can do a test. Let's see, public. What do we test on? Okay, so the next test is we can test if what it does for upper and lower case combination. Right. Uppercase, lowercase, combination. We'll just name the test so as it is, so that we could have a simple naming system here. And we can check if for this, for for both, you can just do weak and strong. I don't think we need to do for all the cases here, but yeah, we can test out the weak password first. So our output will be a weak password if, let's say, our password validator validate password, right, and then this should be a weak password. So let's just do a weak password here. So this is a weak password, and then we'll do a set equals statement here. So this should be a strong password. And for this, we can just use the same thing. Where see we say we use the instance of the class, and then call the particular function password, and then this is going to get the input of a strong password. The strong password I can think of is going to be something like strong pwd, and then we can have 1 2 3 4 5, since it should have all the special since it's a combination of lowercase and uppercase, I think this should be good. 1 2 3 4 5 6 8 slash add. Okay. So this should hopefully work. For this case, so we have 4 tests so far. Let's see if we can think of any other test for this. So other test I could think of is we could count the alphabets that is present in the particular case. So let's say if we give an input which has less than 6 alphabets, it shouldn't be considered as a strong password, even though it is above 14 characters long, right? So even though it is above 14, if we have the alphabet strength as 6, it shouldn't be considered as a strong password. So we can develop a test case for that as well. So we will have a public void test, and then this is gonna test for alphabetic what do we call this, alphabetic character characters count. Right. Oh, looks like we have spelling mistake here. Oh, ALPHA. Yeah, got it. Okay, so for this, similarly, we could have 2 assert statements, and we could check for weak and strong here as well. So what we can do here is we'll do the assert statement. First, we can check for a weak password. So for a weak password, what is the condition is that even though we have above 12 characters, so for this we will use the same password validator dot validate password. So if we use this, let's just say we use a particular function like that, and for this weak password we should have a normal password. So I'm thinking we do a weak password which has more than 14, but it shouldn't have any of the alphabets more than 6. So let's just do an A on top, and then we do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So this should be somewhere above 14, and then we'll just add 2 special characters as well. So for this particular case, this should print out a weak password because we don't have the alphabet count as above 6. And let's test out for the strong password, which is the happy path here. So we need our output to be strong password. Where we have the password validator dot validate password. That is the function that we plan to use, which takes in the input of the string. So what is going to happen here is we're going to have a strong password here, which is going to have more than 6 alphabets, right? So we'll have strong password, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, just a case, and then two of these things here, right? Right. So similarly, I think we could test the other case as well, where we say if it has at least 2 special characters, then it is considered to be a strong password. If it has less than 2 characters, not a strong password. So we could test that case as well, where we'll have a test for it. We can call this test as test special character count. Character count. Oh, I have the void. Kind of forgot that. Yeah, okay. So for this, we'll also do some assert equal statements. First, we're gonna do for a weak password. So for a weak password, right, this can have more than 14 characters. That is not a problem here. Our main thing is that the function input that we're using here, validate password. So the function input that we're using shouldn't take more than two special characters, right? So we'll just have one here, but we're gonna use all the other criteria which satisfies a strong password. So let's do capitals, small letters, and then numbers, right? And then we'll do one special character, and this is about 14 characters, yeah. And we'll do a happy path for test for this as well. We're gonna say it's gonna print out a strong password for, let's say it's gonna print out a strong password. If if we use the same function, and then validate password, and we'll have our actual password here which you can use, which is going to be a strong password. We're going to have pwd. The main goal here is that this particular password should have two special characters at least, so that it could qualify as a strong password, right? So if it has more than two or two, it should be considered as a strong. If it has one, it shouldn't be considered as strong. So I think these are the test cases that I could come up with on spot right now, which is just top on my head right now. And let's, you know what, let's try these tests out first. I think these tests are enough to try out our actual program here. Right. So let's test out. So what we need to do is we need to create this particular function in the password validator Java file. And to do that, I think we can just remove whatever we have here. This is the common, this is the sample code which we get. So remove after removing that. So let's think about how we need to do this now, because we need to have a main function where it's gonna get an input from the user. So we need a scanner for this. So let's use scanner, and then it's gonna be a new scanner, right? Yeah, and then it's gonna be a system input. So we're gonna get system.in here as our input. Right. Do we have conflicts here? Yeah, we have an unnecessary line. I can remove that. We can push this here. Yep. Alright, sounds good. So we need to get an input, and we will need to, oh, you know what, let's just create a new what do you call this, new instead of this class here as well, so that we could use it to call the validator function, just like how we used to call in the test file, just in case, because we actually, it's a safer method to use an instance of a class. So I'm just using this new password validator, right? Because I'm thinking, since we're going to use static methods all over here, it'll be better if we use this, right? So we're gonna see that it's gonna create, it's gonna check that, it's gonna do that. So we'll have a loop here, because I think our function states that the program must immediately prompt the user to enter the password again until it's deemed valid. So since we need an infinite loop here, I think we'll do a while true, which is going to run infinitely unless we break out of it. And I'm guessing we can break out of it when needed. That is when if the password is user password, or I mean like if the password is, let's say, a strong password or weak password, we'll break out of this loop. If not, we'll just continue this loop until we get a valid password. Right. And we can make this system more user friendly while by having these print statements here. So what we can do is we can do a system.out.print, and then we can say, let's say, oh, enter password. Well, right, because since it's a password validator, so we'll have enter password here, and then we can use a string for getting the password, and we'll call this as user password, which is equal to scanner. Next line. Yep, that is the command that we use to get the input from the user in the command line. So after getting the input, let's just do some okay, yeah, I think we can have, so we can just do some basic things. So we'll use a function somewhere in the program, and then we'll call that particular function, right? So let's just do a result, and for the result we will call a particular function in the program, and we'll call it using the instance, and then we'll call this particular function as the validate password function that we want, and we'll send the particular user input to that file. Right. Okay, so what we're doing is we're calling it with this particular user password we're using as a user input, and whatever this function gives out to us, it should be either let's say a strong password or a weak password. We have to do our program accordingly. Right, so we will print out the result to the user first, so we can do system.out.println, and then we can print out the result that we get out of that particular function. Right, and then we can see if the result, so let's say if the result dot equals, so let's say if the result equals to a strong password, for instance, you just type that string in, or if this produces, we can use an or statement here, or if the result is equals a weak password. So these are the only two cases I could see from the problem where we have to break out of the loop. So if we have either one of these cases, we're just gonna break out of the loop. That will stop the program. And maybe we could have a statement here which just says, well, we can have something which just prints out, exiting the program or something like that. Print line, exiting program, right? Yeah, so we'll have a basic main function here. So what it's gonna do is it's gonna create a new scanner, it's gonna create a new instance for the class, and it's gonna ask for a password. We're gonna get an input of the password. It's gonna call this validate function, and then it's gonna print out the result. And if that result is for some reason a strong password or weak password, it will continue. If it's not either, and if it's an invalid password, the loop will continue and it will ask for a new password. So that part of the functionality is done. That is the second part where it says the second part B, where if it's an invalid password, the program must immediately prompt the user again to check for a password. And it's also given here if it is a strong or weak password, it will exit with no further action. Right. So that's a good progress here with the main function, but now is the main part where you have to write the validate password function. So we'll write this function from our test cases, right? So from our test case, what we can see is that we're gonna call this particular function with either of our inputs, and our input should possibly yield an output which equals to the password validator output, which will be either strong, weak, or invalid. Right, so we should get that particular output so that we could have this successful main function. Okay, so let's start with the validate password function. uh, we will declare it on the top here. It's gonna be public string validate password. So this is the particular function that we use everywhere else in the code, right? And this will return uh, statements which will be either invalid, weak, or strong. So to achieve this, I'm thinking we'll have two if statements, which checks if it is invalid password. I think that should be the first one, and then the second one is if it should check if it is a weak password, and if not, we just have one more option which is going to be a strong password. So since there are just three options, we can do two if conditions, and those if conditions we can just have another function calls in it to make it more simpler. So we can have an if condition first, and this if condition is gonna check if the password is valid. So our condition, so if let's say this particular password, oh, we need to get an input here. So since we're gonna pass that input, we can call this as password, that is the user input password, and we're gonna pass that password here as well. So if the password is not valid, what we have to do is we have to return this particular string where it's going to be called invalid password, right? So if we return this particular thing, oh, we have spelling mistake here. Oh, invalid password, yep. So if the password is not valid, it is going to return an invalid password, and if this gets an invalid password, it's going to go into the infinite loop till it gets strong or weak password. And so since we first checked the validity of the password, I think we can next check if it is a strong or weak. So for this, similarly, we can have another function. It's going to check if it's strong or not. Password is password strong. We can use that here. We can pass in the same variable here. Alright, let's see. And if this is the case, what we need to do is, if not of password is strong, that means it's weak. So we will just pass in weak password here. Right. And if both of these cases fail, you know that this password must be a strong one. We are doing an order in this sort because, first we can check the validity. That's the main thing. After checking the validity, we know if it's not a weak password, it should be a strong one. Alright, so we will do a strong password here. Yep, so that function is clear. Now we need to worry about the other two functions that we created. So the first one should check if it is a valid password. The second one should check if it is a strong password. So let's write the function declaration for both of it. Since it is a boolean function, we need to create a boolean variable here, and then it's gonna be is valid, right? And then it's gonna have a string of password, right? Oops. Right. So and then we're gonna have another private function, private boolean function of is strong, if it's strong or not. Also for the same thing, we're gonna have string password for this as well. So for this, right, so for a password to be valid, we just have two conditions, right? The two conditions are, let's see here, what are the conditions? So the condition is that it should be at least 12 characters long, and then it should have all these, it should have only these in them. So I think for this we could use a match function where uh, we use a string regex, and then let's say that this string, right, this should start, right, or this should contain only these things, and we will have a list of things for it, and we will start that with this brackets, right. And what we have here is it should either contain small a to z, right, or it should contain large, or the capital A to Z. We have both of those in, and it can contain 0 to 9, which are the numbers, and then it can contain all the special characters we have. So we can just start typing all the special characters we have over here. And for some special characters, wait, let's just do this again. So it's gonna be slash data hashtag and then $, percentage, up arrow, and star, and then both of these brackets, and then we have the minus, equal, underscore, and then plus, equal, and then we have these two. So essentially we just need to have all the entries here, right? So what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna copy paste all the input values that we need to have, since I already made a note of it. Yeah, so let's just remove this, right? And for some of these, if you can see, we have symbols here which are kind of repeated here, right? You can see, oh wow, this is not accepted, but it's fine, right? Because it has repeated strings. Okay, so here, okay, and for some of these characters we are using the double backslash here, because some of the characters are special characters which can be recognized as some of the commands in the string function. So we're gonna use double backslash here so that we recognize them separately. And here we have another uh, curly braces here which says 12,0, which means that it should be at least 12 characters long. So we're gonna check if, we'll return positive if the password matches the regex, right? So what this function is gonna do is it's gonna print out true if the values that we're gonna give is gonna be inside this particular fields, and also it is about 12. That means the password will be valid, right? And now we should write a function for strong password. So for a strong password, we have some conditions, right? So the conditions, the first one should be to the password dot length, which should be greater than 14, greater than or equal to 14. So we'll have that as our first condition, right? And then we have and we can just do an and here, and operation, right? And it should, let's just do separate functions here, and then it should contain uppercase, lowercase. So this is all from the question. So I'm just looking at the question and then typing this in here. And let's just do another and condition. Since there are 5 conditions that we need to check, we need to check if it contains number special characters. So that is, numbers and special characters are not just special characters or just numbers. So we'll have that in. Right, and this will be also input of password. We'll do an AND operation here, and this has to also do a count. And this count is for the special characters, and this will also have an input of password in it. And we're gonna check if this, let's say if this count should be greater than or equal to 2, because it is mentioned that it should be at least 2. And we're gonna also do another, the last one, which is gonna be count alphabetic characters, right? And this should take the same input, and this should be greater than or equal to 6, right? So, and I think we can just do a return here. So this will return true if all of these pass. So now we need to write test case, conditions for all these functions. So let's just start with one by one, where we could write the conditions for it. First one is the upper lowercase condition. So we'll write a boolean for this as well, and then this will be for the upper lowercase, and this will pass in the string password. Right, and what this has to have is, it is just gonna check if this particular thing has upper and lowercase in it. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna use the same regex match function that we use. So what we're gonna do is it's gonna return password dot matches. We just need to check a few things here, that it either has, right? So since it has something which has, we will have this dot star here, which is something which checks if that particular function contains these, and not explicitly check if it's in the start or the end. So it should have A to Z small, right? And it should also have password.matches, the bigger ones. That is, we'll use the same thing. We're just going to do dot star and then square brackets, and then we'll do A to Z and then close square brackets dot star. Right. So what this does is it's gonna check if it contains any uppercase or lowercase in it. Okay, so for the next one, I need to check if it contains special characters. So for this, I'll do a same Boolean function similar to what we have. Special characters, and this will take the string password as well. And what this function should do is it should check if we have special characters in it, right? So for this, it should check. So even for this, I've already figured out the so since it's just a special characters, we can just copy paste this particular special characters that we have, that is from 9 to this, and then we can just paste this particular one in. So it's gonna check for the special characters in this case, right? And it also should contain numbers, so we're gonna use /d, which is gonna check for all the numbers, and this is going to check for all the special characters, right? So the next function is a private Boolean function, and it contains rather, I think we could just have this as an int rather than having it as a Boolean, since we are checking if this particular thing is about to or not. So since we don't need to have a true or false, we don't need to have a true or false function for this. And then this is going to be for the special characters, and this is also going to have the string password input. So this one, what we'll do is we'll still do the same thing, where it's gonna check for the special character count that we have here. I'll just paste this in. So what this does is it's gonna check for it's gonna count for the special characters, right? And then if the count function, if it is, so it'll just count the special characters, that is these characters, and give it back to our function call statement here. And we'll have a similar function for counting the alphabetic characters. This will also take in a string of password, right? And then this will probably do a return, which is similar to the last one, and we're gonna just do this, copy paste this, and then modify it a bit, right? So we have, I think, completed the programming part of it. We can just run this class and see what happens here. So we're running, it says enter password, so we can just test it out here. So we can let's say I enter password which is not valid, right, which has 5 characters. Yeah, it should say invalid password, and then it asks for a enter password. Okay, that function works, that is a good sign. And the next one is we'll have a strong password or weak password. So let's type in a weak password actually. So for a weak password, we just need to have 12 characters at least, right? And then yeah, it says weak password, and then it exits from the program. That is a good sign. Next, we'll try a strong password here. So let's say we have a strong password. So for a strong password, we need to have numbers and at least 2 characters, right? Yeah, and this should be a valid strong password. Yeah, and then it exits program. Okay, so the functionality seems to be working fine, but let's just double check it. Let's say if I enter multiple invalid passwords, it's gonna ask for the program is an infinite loop which just runs for it. And if I type, yep, I think we can add a method here which just says, let's just add something here that exits if we type an exit. I think that's a good method to add in, so we don't need to always type in a weak or strong password. So how do we do that? I think we can just add a method here, right? We can just say if, let's just add a condition here. So let's just say if the user password ignore is equals, let's just do ignore cases because we don't really care if the exit is typed in caps or not caps. So let's just say if the particular user types in an exit command, we need to break out of this loop. That's all you need to do. So now let's rerun. Let's stop this and then rerun this particular function. So if we type in invalid, it's keep going. But if we type in exit, right? Oh, it should exit the program. Okay, yeah, that works fine. Okay, good. So that's good that we got the functionality of the program working. Now let us move on to the tests. So let's see if, so as you can see, these tests are now not in the red color, which is a good sign. Okay, so let's first run the first test. And it looks like all the tests pass, and here you can see that if we, so what this does is it's gonna call this particular function, which is a validate password function. It's gonna pass in invalid password, right? If it passes the invalid password, it will first check if the password is valid, and it will see if it contains all these and it is about 12. If not, it's gonna print out an invalid, and we can see that it works as expected. And for the second one is a weak password, and we say that it's a weak password. So what it's gonna do is it's gonna, I think we can just quickly do a debug just to explain how this works. Right, we will just debug this. Right, so what's happening is that it is first gonna pass this one, and then it's gonna go into the strong or not. And if we step over this function, we can see that it's gonna return a weak password, and it's gonna go back here, and then it's gonna go, yeah, that's a weak password. Oh, that's good. So that's how a weak password works. And for a strong password, we can also do a debug function for this, right? So yeah, we can just do a breakpoint over here and then run debug this particular program test. So what it says is, at first it's gonna check if it's an invalid password or not. Yep, and then next it's gonna go for that one. So yep, it is a weak password. And the third one, it should return a strong password. No, the first condition failed. The second condition should fail. Yep, and thus we get the third condition, which is a strong password. It's good. Okay, so let's run the second one now. Okay, the second one also seems to work fine because it's just testing out the strength. But right now I'm thinking if we need to test out a strength, if that is a good test or not. I'm thinking this is not a very good test because it's just checking if it is the password is a weak strength or a strong strength, but we have similar test in the validation as well. So I'm thinking this is not a good test to have in here, but let's just leave it in for now. Let's go for the next one, which is going to test out the length. So this is a big test here, and it looks like even this one works fine. So for the first one, it's gonna be null. It's gonna print out. It's just gonna go here, and then I think it's gonna fail in this itself. So it's gonna print out an invalid password. And for the second case, it's also for invalid password, which is below 12. So both these cases are below 12, so it's gonna fail anyways. And then we have a strong password, two strong passwords. One is of a length which is less, and one is of a length which is like 30 here. I think we can put this here. So yeah, of length 30 and above. So that's like an extreme rare case, and we also tested that out. That's good. Okay, so the next one is to test out the special characters. Right, it looks like that also worked fine. So for the special characters, we are testing if it is an invalid password with special characters, right? Because this does not exceed 12, or it is not 12, so it is going to be invalid. This is going to be a weak password because there, even though it has special characters, it has no capitals in it, so it's going to be weak. And we're going to test out a strong password with the particular characters, special characters. That's good as well. So next, let's test out the uppercase lowercase combination. Oh, looks like one of our passwords failed, and it seems to be on this particular line. Okay, so this particular function failed. Why does this fail? We're testing the uppercase lowercase for a weak password, but it's printing out the invalid password. I think we can just quickly debug to find the problem here. Yeah, so we can do a debug. So the password is weak password, so this shouldn't go into this. Oh, but it looks like it's get into the valid password function. Oh, okay. So, well, okay, it's a silly mistake. That thing is, I think I inputted a password which is less than 12, so it is failing there. So maybe I can add uh, two more characters. Maybe let's say weakest password. So this should be about 12, right? If I run this program now, this should work. No, even this has a problem now. Okay, the first one passed. Let's see the problem that we have in the second one. Second one is printing out a weak password. We can also debug this to see why this problem happens. So essentially we need a strong password, so it should reach here, but it's not reaching here, so let's just do a point here. I mean, for let's just do a debug. Okay, so this is for the previous case. This should work as expected, and this is for the strong password, right? What's happening in this function? We can step into this function, so it's gonna go here, right? It's gonna check the length, right? It's above 14, so it goes to the next one. It's gonna check for the upper lower case. It passes. It goes for the special characters. It passes it because it has O, and then it goes for this function. It should have at least two. It looks like it failed for that one, so it's gonna go to, okay, so we need to have another special character here for this to work. So if we have another special character here, and then if I run stop and rerun this, no, that passed. So the problem here was the problem with the weak password and the strong password. Even though we have the uppercase lowercase combination, I didn't check for the other conditions for it to be a strong password in the input. Alright, so the next condition is to check if the alphabetic count, right? So let's run this one. Looks like the test fails for the second one. Oh, it just seemed to be a typo here where I have an exclamation here, and I just don't have one here. Okay. Well, if you rerun it, okay, it passed. So what's happening here is we can do a breakpoint here in this function because it will go through this function anyways. So yeah, we'll just run this, debug this, right? So what's happening is that for this particular password, it's gonna go through the strong conditions here. So it will check if it has a lowercase, and it looks like it does not, so it is considered to be a weak password, right? And then so it just goes back. So what if we had a lowercase here? What if I did a, right? Because we needed to test all the conditions. Right now it is not testing it. because right now it's just failing with just an A, right? So let's just add another A here so that it has a lowercase to test. Let's debug this again. Okay. So okay, now it goes to the second one. If it contains numbers, special characters, it has one. It has the special characters as well. Okay, now it checks if it has the alphabetic characters. Well, it doesn't, so it just goes back to the weak. Okay, yeah, that test is better now because we have a small variable. I mean, that is a lowercase variable there, so it will just test out for what we need. And the next one is a strong password where it will just go through the same thing and then give out the results for it. And finally, we have the test for special character count. And oh, looks like the same typo here that I had before. Let's rerun this. Yeah, we can deal with that. Okay. So it looks like this program ran as expected, as it's just going through this particular validator function and then calculating the special characters, or special character count. Okay. Right, so we can now run this with the coverage to see how many lines of the code we cover. It looks like we just cover 87% of the lines. That is not good for testing purposes, because for testing we should make sure to cover all the cases. Here we can see that we miss out on the main function tests. So we should make tests for the main function as well. Right, the main function is from the question you can see it is that we need to have the test for the inputs, right? Because the input, it's gonna be so it's gonna check if it's a what is it, if it's a valid, invalid, or strong password. So we need to have some tests that checks the main function. So I think we could, I mean, it wouldn't make sense to have it in the password validator test file because this checks the password validation, but we need to have some other test to check out the main test function as well. So maybe we'll create a new Java test file. We'll do a new file, and then this will be Java, or we can just call this as main test.java. Right, and for this particular function, right, we need to mimic the system input. That is going to be a task for us to do. So luckily, I think I have an idea on how to do it because I've done a similar thing before. So we'll have a class here, and then into the class we will have so basically we need to set up a few things, and then we'll have an input stream. We should have a output stream, but we can use the byte array output system. It's already there, and also for the input stream we can also use the private variable private input stream. So this is a Java function, and then we can have this as the original system input. So because we're just gonna mock this, we're gonna have a variable for it. Oh, there is a typo here. Original. And then we're gonna have another variable which is going to be byte array output. So this is gonna be the output stream. What we're gonna do is I think we can just mock this output here. And then this will be our test output that we want our actual system input to be. Okay, so just like before, we'll have, oops, we don't need a override. We need a before to actually set up these things. So let's do an annotation for before, and then let us do a setup function, public void setup. Because we need to set up a few things here. Okay, so with that, there will be some setups here. And next, there should be also an after annotation where we have to tear down some of the functions after we use them, some of the variables. So we'll have a void teardown, right? And then we will have some test cases here, which is going to test out the main function. So we'll say these test cases will be first. So okay, we can just call this first. We'll test out the main, void test main with strong input, strong password. So there should be one test for this, test condition for this, and I think we can just have 2 or 3 of this, just by saying we should have a couple of these, one for the strong, one for the weak, and one should be for the invalid case, right? So we have 3 of these tests. Maybe we can have one for the exit, that is to check if we exit. Maybe, okay, let's worry about it later. So these are the 3 things I can think of in the main function, right? But so what we want to do is, in the main function, if we have a strong password, we need to test that. If you have a weak password, we need to test that. And if you have an invalid password, we need to test that, because we have to print out 3 different results, right? So we have to test out that particular main function as well. Alright, so okay, for this I think we can just have a string here first, which depicts the strong password. So let's just have this as an input, and this input should be a strong password. So let's just type in a strong password pwd 123, and then it has exclamation and at. Right, okay, we need to have a function which gets this input as our system input, right? So we need to write a function for it. So maybe let's do a function for this. We can maybe we'll call this function as, we'll just have it just in simple naming terms. We can just say it's going to be provide test input, because we need this input to flow through that particular function, and not for it to wait for an actual input from the keyboard. So we'll have a function which gives this particular input for that. Then we will call the password validator. So we need to call the main function. So we'll just use the password validator.main, which calls the mail function. And we don't have any arguments, so I think we can just have this as null, because we just need to call the mail function, and this will be the input for that main function. And yeah, so if we give this particular input, we have to check that this particular thing, okay, for this we can do an assert true, which will be an easy job for us, rather than testing what output we get every time. So for this, we can just import true method here. Okay, so we need to check that the program output that we get, which can also be another function, program output that we get contains, right, it should contain the string strong password, right? Because if you give a strong password, it should contain a strong password. And we can also check if, since we did assert true here, I think we can do one where we can assert for false, right? Because and then we can check if there is no weak password. And similarly, wait, yeah, we can import this. And similarly, we can do another assert false and see that we don't get an invalid as well for this particular thing, because we just need the strong password and nothing else. We don't need invalid or valid, or I mean invalid or weak. So we can check for that as well. Password. Cool. So that is a good technique to check, I think. Not sure. We need to figure out the inputs for provide test and get program output. So maybe let's just work on one test case now. Okay, let's figure out this functions here. That is the provide test input and the get program output. So for the provide test, I will do a function provide test input. So what this has to do is this will get the string input that we want. Uh, String input, and then this will have a byte array, right? This will have a byte array input, sorry, this will have a byte array input stream, and then this will be a test input, which is equal to new byte array, which will get input get bytes. Okay, so what this function does is that, so for this, so the input dot get bytes, it converts the input string into the array of bytes, right? And the byte array input stream, it creates an input stream with this particular byte array. And so the system, so we after this we need the system in command, which will take this particular how do you do this? Okay, we'll have system dot set in, which will get this particular input, right? Then it should display it there, so we can have the test input here. So what this should do is it should, it sets the created input stream as the input for the program, and I believe that's how it should work. And we have to do the similar thing for the program output, where it's just we just get the program output and convert it to string here, and then get program output. Why is this function not recognized here? That is a problem. What do we use here? Oh yeah, get program output. Okay, that's good. And this will just return the test output, which we have already defined before, to string, right? Because we need it as a string, and the test output, right? You can see test output is the byte array output stream that we get from the program, right? So let's just run this. Okay, looks like because the test output is null. Okay, that is a problem. Let's see how to solve this. So it's saying that there's a chance that this particular output will be null. Oh, that is because the test input. Uh, I don't know why. Shouldn't be a problem usually. I don't know why we're facing this problem now. Hey. Oh, I think that is because we didn't do any of these setup files. Okay, cool. Okay, maybe yeah, we'll just write the setup then. For setup, what we need is the original system in that we're using. We need that to be a system in, and the test output we need to do that as a setup as well, because we need this to be a new output, new byte array output stream. And we should also do a system that set out, and then we'll have the new print stream test output here. Okay, so I can explain what this does here. So what this does is the set out, it redirects the standard output to the test output stream. So whatever output we get, it will be redirected as the test output stream, and then test output stream is a stream which is used to capture the program output, and the original system in which saves the reference to the original standard input. So that's the reference point that we will use here. And we also need to have an after so that we close all the current things we need that we already used. So for the after, we can do a system set in for the original input stream. We just tear it down, and then we do system set out. We do a system out. Okay, so what this does is that so the system set in original system, so it restores the original standard input stream after we do each of the tests, and the set out system which resets all the standard output to the default, which is the console output. So that's what it does. So maybe if we run this now, it should cause a problem. Yeah, as you can see, this case passed because it'll go through the main function. We can just, I think we can do, what do we do? We can do a breakpoint later and then test. But yeah, what it does is it goes through this program, and if it reaches a strong password and breaks it, we will get our particular test output for the main function. So we're basically mocking our input. Instead of getting a command line input, we are getting the input directly from our program. So that's why we need the byte array output stream here. So we'll just do the similar thing for both of these. So we can just copy paste this actually. I think that'll be a much faster approach. So for the second one with the weak password, right, we need a weak password first of all. So we'll remove this. Then enter weak password. Our weak password can be just called weak password. 123 exclamatory, and then if it contains, so this should contain a weak, and this shouldn't contain a strong, right? And rest of the methods are same. We can give this a try. And yeah, looks like even this one passed, because for this particular input, that's the output we should get, because the output should contain the weak password and shouldn't contain the rest. And we can just copy paste this for invalid as well. So yeah, we'll just copy this and then paste this in. Oops. Oh, that sucks. Okay. Okay, so for this is the weak password or the invalid, right? So for this particular invalid password, I think we can have this input. So we'll have this as just invalid password because we need something to be low. But since okay, and then this should contain invalid password, and this shouldn't contain strong or weak. Okay, so let's test this out. Oh, looks like there's an error. Okay, let's just quickly debug this. So what this should do is it should go through this loop, right? Yeah, because we're calling the main function. This is the main test, right? So we can just debug. Okay, wait. Maybe our break client. Okay, yeah, we'll run this now. Okay, so we're doing a scanner here. So what the scanner is getting is the user invalid password that we want. It checks if it's exit. It's not exit, so it goes to the next one. It checks. What does it do? It sends this to the password validator, and the password validator sends invalid password. So this is correct. And then it's gonna check if it's a stronger. For it's gonna say it's neither. And then since it's an infinite loop, it's just gonna go on forever, right? Yeah, it's just gonna scan for the next item, but we don't have anything to scan. Alright, so testing this invalid function, if it has an invalid password, is going to be a bit complicated than we expected. Maybe because if you want to test out this particular while, has to be another injection that we need to use another code. But yeah, we don't really need to do that. But to test out if we get the invalid password, what we can change here is we can just do a next line here, right? We can just do printwd /n exit here, but so that we will know that we get at least the invalid password contains, because this output should contain an invalid password, right? So yeah, this ran successfully because this particular output will contain invalid password. Even though the next line is exit, we checked for the invalid input as well here. Oh, that's nice. Okay, and I think we can add another case where we test out for the exit. Since we can have test with, you know what, we can do another one here, and then we can call this test main while loop exit, and this input, and for this we can just have the exit as an input, and for this particular input it should not contain any of these, right? So everything should be an asset false, and it shouldn't contain any of these. Let's do a quick run of this. Yep, and it looks like even this passed. Okay, so I'm thinking these are the main functions or the test cases that we need to have. Let us do a coverage test for this because I think that is an important part here. Oh, it looks like we almost covered all the lines here. We covered all the 29 of 29 lines in the example.arg. Well, oh yeah, that is good. So it looks like we covered all the lines in our code using these test cases, and also some of the test cases that we use for our main function, which we have it in a separate file here. But it does the purpose. So looks like we have, so what we did here now today is that we follow the test-driven development where we first wrote the test, and then we saw that some of our tests failed, and we had to modify some of our tests later. But uh, we first wrote down the tests that we need and then wrote the code according to our tests cases. So first we wrote down all these tests, and then we wrote down our Java file, which was made according to our tests. And then we modified some of the test here because we had some errors there, and then we need to some tests were a fail case, so we need to change those tests. And we also added in test for the main function, uh, and the we also changed uh, the Java file's main function according to our main test file. Right. So we can clearly say that we have followed the test-driven development here, and we have made these tests that can be used to check for the password validator file. Okay. Thank you for taking your time and watching this video. Please let me know if you have any questions or doubts with this particular code and program.